very clear that this should have never happened. You cannot restrict airspace over a major city without coordinating with the city, the airport, the hospitals, the community leadership. That failure to communicate is unacceptable. These types of decisions have consequences. Medical evacuation flights were forced to divert to Las Cruces. All aviation operations were grounded, including emergency flights. This was a major and unnecessary disruption, one that has not occurred since 9/11. El Paso is not just a dot on a map. We are a major city. We are the 6th largest city in the state of Texas, and we are the 22nd largest city in the United States. Without hospital, military operations, and emergency services and critical infrastructures that depend on coordinated and reliable airspace operations. Decisions made without notice or coordination puts lives at risk and creates unnecessary danger and confusion. From the moment we learned about this, my office worked with Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, Major General Taylor at Fort Bliss, and our local, state, and federal partners to get answers and to push for this to be corrected and lifted, which it was. I appreciate those efforts. I also want to say thank you to the leadership across our community who came together to work through this problem. The city leadership, the El Paso Airport, and our federal and state partners. Your professionalism and dedication to public safety made a difference. El Paso deserves better. El Paso deserves better communication and better coordination, and more respect for the El Paso and the people that live in this community. We will be following up with the FAA to make sure that this never happens again. In closing, I want to emphasize that El Paso has always been a safe city, and we will remain one of the safest cities in the United States. I'm going to turn it over to, who's next? Laura, who's next? Okay.
We're going to open it up to questions. I will ask you, please wait till we get a microphone to you. How many emergency medical flights or urgent critical flights were diverted because of this situation?
So I had a call this morning with some of the hospital operations. I don't know the exact number of flights, but I can tell you that there was a lot of surgical equipment that was coming in from Dallas and other parts of the country to do surgeries here in our community. That type of equipment did not show up here in El Paso.
What was the official reason given to you by which agency for the closure of the airport?
Yeah, so we're still determining the official reason, but I can tell you that the FAA was the primary agency that made the decision to shut down our airspace here over this community. So the official reason, we're still trying to get that answer of why it was closed down here in El Paso and southern New Mexico.
And you say there was no communication with the city. What does that communication look like when what the federal government says was a security threat? What would that communication look like?
Yeah, I think at the very least that communication looks like calling the city, calling our chief of police, calling the public safety officers that we have in our community to alert them that we're going to be shutting down your airspace in your community. None of that took place. So we woke up, just like many of you, at midnight last night, 1 in the morning, to the texts and the calls that we received that our airspace was shut down. So better communication from our federal government to your city, especially your leadership, that you're going to shut down your airspace. That coordination, that communication just did not happen.
You were talking about not letting FAA do this again in any near future or anything without communication. Is there anything that, I don't want to say they can face, but that El Paso is doing for them to know that they can't just like close the aerial space?
Well, I think, certainly that we've got to look into this more and find out what happened, what caused this to occur. This is certainly something that the FAA needs to look at themselves and figure out what did they do and how can they improve to make this better, because you just cannot, again, we're a major city. El Paso is a large city. You cannot just shut down a city. There was people coming to El Paso. Our airport was in chaos. Our community was scared, all because someone decided to shut down our airspace. You just cannot do that. And they lifted it real quick. So we've got to figure out what the root cause of that problem was.
What kind of financial implications could this have had for the city, for the airport, for travel in general, being potentially shut down for 10 days? And do you know what kind of an impact it had in the hours that it was shut down?
Yeah, I'm sure it's significant. I'm sure that number is large, and it's one of them numbers you may not ever be able to quantify. You look at the travelers that were stuck at our El Paso International Airport, they had to spend money, those that could get a rent-a-car, to get out of El Paso. So that cost them money. You look at some of the business deals that were going to take place today here in our community that just may not happen. So we don't know the complete impact. I've had friends that have texted from Dallas, Texas, that were trying to get rent-a-cars to get back here to our community. I don't know what that number is, but I can tell you it's going to be large.
There were some reports on CNN that one of the reasons was cartels flying drones over airport space or in the vicinity. Is there any truth to that?
Let me turn that over to the chief or to someone else to better answer this.
Thank you, Mayor. So your question on drones, that's just been reported. We have not been notified of anything. That's just rumor that we're hearing the chatter. As the mayor talked about, there's been no official determination put out to us on why it was closed down, so we won't speculate on any of those.
And can the airport be closed without your approval, Mayor, or does that have to go through you and you have to give the yes or no on that?
So I've never closed the airport. Again, I've been here a little bit, 13 months, so we've never closed the airport since 9/11. So again, the FAA is the one that shut down the airspace, which ultimately closed our airport. So our airport is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So the answer to that is probably no. I would never close down the airport unless there is a national security threat against this community. So no, we wouldn't close the airport for something like it. And I will touch on your drone question. There's probably been drones ever since they've been started flying in this community. So that's not nothing new. So a drone shutting down our airspace, we've got to get better than this.
And so you were unaware that the airport was going to be closed?
So was I unaware that, so just like many of us in this room, we've got the same alert from the FAA that they were shutting down our airspace. Yes, so to say that I was aware of this, if I was aware of this, first thing I would have done is had a press conference with this community to say, we're shutting down the airspace. So we did not know that it was going to be shut down.
Hi, Mayor. Stephanie Chavez with Univision. I know you mentioned El Paso is not only a dot. We have the border. We also have Fort Bliss. What is the next step as leaders to get the information of what happened and to get better communication? Because, like you said, it affects its citizens, but we also have the border and the Fort Bliss, which a lot of people might think we could be a target since we have the base. What message do you have for the community?
Yeah, so we're going to continue to reach out to our state and federal partners. We'll continue to reach out to the Congresswoman's office to make sure that we have information on what happened. I want to thank our Fort Bliss partners too. I was on the phone not only with our Congresswoman, but with Major General Taylor this morning, and we will make sure that we continue to communicate. And that's what the leadership did in this community. We came together to figure out what was going on. Like many of you in this room, we learned about it the same way. It was something where they shut down our airspace. So we did not know that until we were playing defense at that point. So once we figured out what was going on, the leadership came together to communicate, and we'll continue to do that.
Two more questions?
Do you think there will be a true answer as to why this happened?
I hope so.
I'll repeat the question. Do you think that there will be a true, honest answer about why the government chose to shut down the airport?
I sure hope so, and I can tell you El Paso deserves better. We deserve to know why our airport was shut down. It's unacceptable. So I hope we get that answer.
Last question, KBA.
And do you feel that El Paso has just been overlooked by the federal government? Do you think it's because that we are a border community that you weren't notified, that they just shut down the airspace?
Yeah, I don't know that for fact, but I can tell you that, whatever information they had that shut down our airspace is something that should have been shared with this leadership. That is the piece of information we don't have. And once we get that, we can let the citizens know why they shut it down. So just like many of you, there's a lot of unanswered questions that we just don't have. I also want to thank the media that's in this room. A lot of you were at the airport. A lot of you were working hours this morning and working with the guests that were stuck in our community. And thank you for what you did there. It appeared that everyone was helping each other. So that's what this community does. We come together to help each other.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you guys.
All right, thanks for joining us here on KXAN Plus. We just heard a press conference live from the city of El Paso, and with me to debrief all of this is our reporter, Barrett Tryon. Barrett, thanks for joining me. You've been on this story all morning.
Yeah.
Tell us what's going on.
Oh, man, this has kind of been a back and forth, if you will. So around 12:30 or so our time last night, this unprecedented, this unplanned, this unexplained flight restriction went into place over El Paso, also affected southern New Mexico. There's an airport there, but it's not commercial flights. So no commercial flights could take off or land. You couldn't have cargo planes, medical helicopters, that wasn't an option. So virtually shut down, and they said it would be that way for 10 days. So that takes us until the late evening hours, I should say, of next Friday, the 20th. So if you think about this, temporary flight restrictions go into effect a lot all across the country all day long. That's nothing new. So you think about things like maybe the vice president or president are visiting another dignitary. You think about hurricane hunters.
That was the first thing that came to my mind when I heard this.
So that's not unusual, but to have it be a 10-day stretch, that's what's unusual. And you heard in that news conference, this is something that hasn't happened since 9/11.
Yeah.
And obviously the mayor there, Bernard Johnson, who we were hearing from, severely frustrated. They were just as blindsided, the city, that this was even going on. So you can imagine, our station in El Paso caught up with some travelers last night who were like, what do you mean our flights aren't happening? They just getting in. We heard from air traffic control. They told a plane that was just getting ready to take off last night that, by the way, this is now closed for 10 days. And the pilot even laughed. He's like, 10 days? She's like, yeah, we'll be here, but no flights are going in and out. So you can imagine the confusion there, but just as much here because we didn't know what was going on. This obviously concerning because it happened really late at night into the early morning hours. So people trying to get information. The FAA isn't waiting up all night to release that information. The mayor saying El Paso deserves better. He hopes this never happens again. So a really rare occurrence. Now, NBC News now this morning is reporting, and they kind of hinted on this a little bit during the press conference, that it's because some Mexican drug cartel drones actually went into U.S. airspace. So that would make sense, that they would put restrictions immediately in place so that commercial aircraft or other aircraft would not be involved. But the mayor saying, hey, they still haven't told us an official thing. The chief of police still saying, hey, we don't have any official word.
Not confirmed between those two organizations.
At all. So it sounds like the city completely just left in the dark with this.
Yeah.
And we, one of the things we talked about all morning long is like, what are the implications? Because even 8 hours of it being closed, it opened, that restriction was lifted just before 8 o'clock our time this morning, with surgical equipment the mayor was talking about.
Yeah.
Emergency
equipment heading out there.
Absolutely. Business deals, people trying to fly in. Will they, rebook those flights that were maybe for, from the morning? It's the 7th largest airport in the state of Texas, but it's still a busy place for commerce. So you think about a lot of those flights are early in the morning or late at night. There's not a lot of in between in situations like that. So when that starts affecting flights in the morning, obviously they're delayed and they're eventually now taking off.
Yeah.
That has a lot of people saying, okay, we're just going to cancel. That trip isn't going to be planned. Or as the chief said, people renting cars, and that's a hike from Dallas.
To get into town, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of questions that are still unanswered this morning. Our airport was in chaos. I love that he said that, because imagine being there. Airlines are like, we don't know what you're talking about. You have passengers trying to get somewhere. So really unusual. Yeah, I mean, that's not a sight that you see every day.
No.
On an airport, especially, on a Wednesday morning. People got places to go, things to see. I guess maybe the good news is it didn't happen during spring break, because that could have caused a whole other mess of headaches. But yeah, the mayor wants to know the impact economically, the surgical equipment, and he still just does not have an official reason as to why, and no one contacted him.
Yeah.
So I think one thing we'll learn probably today is what happened with that breakdown of communication. What is the FAA's policy on situations like this? This obviously involves the Department of Defense. How do they get involved? Because that lack of communication obviously scary. And then they did tweet out eventually when it was lifted saying there was no threat to the city of El Paso.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
Good news. That's the only good news that we're hearing so far, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But the mayor calling it a major and unnecessary disruption, especially, because you have no idea what's going on. The Congresswoman Escobar was getting involved.
Yeah.
Fort Bliss, obviously nearby.
Very close.
Very close. So that affects that. Airspace is something you don't realize how important it is until all of a sudden it's gone or you can't use it. I think 9/11 was the greatest example of that.
And that's exactly what they mentioned. The last time that this happened was during 9/11. So it is a big deal that they decided to call that shutdown.
Right. And you think about if something like that happened in Austin or something like that happened in Dallas or Houston, that ripple effect and the immediacy of that. And so while El Paso is a smaller airport, it is feeding into the larger cities across the state and across the nation for that matter. And to not know what's going on and just have it shut down, that's scary. So obviously in the state of current affairs, that has a lot of people on edge, and that makes you wonder. And also, could this happen again? And what is the protocol and what does that look like?
Yeah.
So I think those are all questions that between the city certainly wants to find out. But then from the other end, from the government, some accountability as to what's going on, what's happening here, how do we better relay that information to people to maybe, calm some fears?
Yeah.
Because we hypothesized this morning, and we certainly don't want to do that. But obviously, there was some type of quote-unquote threat for them to make that decision ultimately to close airspace. Because
Immediately, right?
Immediately. It doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
They... during peak travel times, they'll stop the flow of flights, like let's say to and from Florida to the East Coast because it gets too crowded. We certainly saw late last year with staffing affecting flights, and they're pulling back on the number of flights they're taking off because of air traffic controllers. But to just say flat out, hey,
no more.
This airspace not open for business. You can't use it. And they had the authority to shoot down planes if someone was in that airspace. And it went up to 18,000 feet. And that's helicopters. That is the whole shebang. So scary situation. And for people just not to know what's going on, that frustration by Mayor Johnson there certainly
understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are the next steps?
I think really the next steps, the city needs to figure out what happened and how this communication can get better. And certainly that's something that the mayor is going to try to figure out today. Second, I think we're going to hear more and we're going to get confirmation as to exactly why the airspace was closed. Certainly that frustration, you could feel it, you could hear it between not only the mayor, but other public officials, even the police chief saying, drones flying in and around on El Paso is nothing new. That, they've been around since drones have kind of become more normalized. So I think to figure out why weren't they notified, and then going forward, if this happens again, how do we communicate and communicate effectively? So that it also, the police chief also mentioning about rumors about why this is happening. That's obviously a problem, not something you want to, you don't want rampant rumors about something that's totally untrue running around town, scaring people even more. I saw that TxDOT put out a note this morning. There was an erroneous thing that was sent out saying that roadways were closed for 10 days, and that wasn't true. So you can see how fast that misinformation fires and is spread around. So that's a concern. And I think, you will learn more about kind of how this is going and what we can learn from this moving forward. Hopefully today, if not sooner than later.
Yes, of course. And Barrett, thank you for sitting and chatting with us here today. I know that you've been on this story all morning.
Yeah.
We have an article already on our website, KXAN.com, and we will be updating this article with all the new information that comes after we finish this live stream. So if anyone wants to stick around and stay up to date with this story, you can visit our website, KXAN.com. Again, Barrett, thank you so much for joining us. It was nice to have you here on
I know.
KXAN Plus.
Nice to be sitting down inside a studio for once.
We'll see you next time, Barrett.
All right.